of cases too, I'm your helpful marketing kind of guy. Jamie says I've been at Collider for a little over 2 years now. In that time, I've had the great opportunity to work with many people within Collider and on a consulting basis. And previously, I actually worked for an ad agency within Rochester, Minnesota as well. So I'm actually going to minimize myself because I can see myself. I do not like that. Um,
You might be stuck on
okay.
there because I make your video full screen so it would actually look like something when I recorded it. So you might want to just like hover.
Don't look.
I'm just pushing it off to the corner here, so I really don't look at it too much. But
oddly enough, I did that too.
So I had a great opportunity to look through you guys' curriculum. I had a lot of great information in there. But so what I did is I reviewed the different sections, especially in the digital marketing, a little bit in the branding. But being honest, branding isn't really my forte, but I will give you my digital marketing perspective in some of those areas. But what I really wanted to go through today, instead of going through a slide-by-slide of going through what you've already went through, I wanted to try to give away 9 simple lessons when it comes to digital marketing. And using the curriculum that you guys have already reviewed in this area, or might have reviewed it, I'm not sure, we're in the process. But really, it's, I'm just trying to expand in certain areas and hopefully it can be a little bit of assistance. So without further ado, oh, and by the way, obviously we'll have questions after, and I'm really excited to hear what you guys might have for me. So jumping right into the lessons, the first one I wanted to share with you guys when talking about finding a brand, it's not just a name, but it has to be also an easy identifier of what you do. You can be bold with what you create for your name, be a little out there, a little abstract, but being able to bring it back in, can you bring in a keyword within your brand name? Also starting to think of when you're going into the process of creating your brand, your product, your service, and you're creating a website, is it available to even be a domain? Because all of a sudden you might decide on a brand name, you start creating materials, all these different areas, and then you go in to register your website, and next thing you know, that website's not available. And in a lot of ways too is that you might end up having to grab something you might not necessarily want. So instead of, let's say, Ethan Herbert, it might have to be theethanherbert.com or ethanherbert.net. And when also thinking about brands too, it's really important to consider that .com is still the winner in a lot of ways. But there are some ways you can really play with your brand name to be fun and also be a clear identifier of what your website is. I did grab 2 examples here. One, for instance, is pistache.io, so pistachio. And one that's a little bit more of an identifier of what it is. It's a to-do list application, and it's called list.ly, so that's Listly. So just trying to think of that too, as you can be abstract, you can be fun, you can be creative. And there, my dog's barking, so I apologize for that. It's probably only going to get worse over the next minute or so. So I'm going to, luckily I have the mic right here. But kind of moving on to that, just, really one of the first things I do, I really encourage people to go and play with is when you're trying to think about your brand name, go to GoDaddy.com, GeoDaddy.com, and just start typing in URLs. Start playing with it. Not only look at what the URL is, but also how does it look? Is it aesthetically pleasing? I know that might sound weird, but you got to start thinking of your website's going to be on marketing materials, be it brochure, be social media, things like that, and having it just look good. I'm not sure if that makes sense to you guys, but it is important to take that time to really think about your domain. So going into the second lesson, and I'm really sorry about that, is you need a website and you need it now. So when you start creating your brand, even if it's just in its infancy, you have to start considering that you need to start generating some form of interest or deciding if there is really interest, especially when you're doing startups. One thing I see startups do a lot is actually, even before they even go out and develop a product, they'll actually go register a domain, get hosting, and actually post a website up right away. Now, in that time, they might only talk about a little thing, maybe introduce what the brand name is, what your mission statement is, and what problem you're solving. And in a lot of ways, too, what they'll actually end up doing at the end is, are you interested? Put your email below to sign up early or learn more. And what they use that email field for is really to judge interest. Now, how do they generate that interest? That might be through advertising. That might be through word of mouth. You know, for instance, if you work at Mayo and you're working on a healthcare startup, you might reach out to your colleagues and, you know, start seeing and try to get that feedback and say, hey, can you speak about this? And as those lists go on and generate, now you already have a marketing list that you can reach out to when you're developing that product. And you can start sharing with them what's happening, where you are in the process. You can share updates about your brand with that. You can latest news. Did you recently get funded? Things like that. You can also share industry articles right within your website. But really, it's an introduction of who you are and what you want to do, and deciding even before you go, is this right for me? Is this right for the community? Is it speaking to my core audience? And with that said, when it comes to developing a website, even though there are plenty of options, there's Wix, there's WordPress, Squarespace, things like that. The third lesson I want to jump right into in that same regards is if you think you can do a website, you probably can't. And this includes myself. I'm not a website developer. I have friends and I have colleagues that are website developers. And the thing is, while your nephew, your uncle, your son, anything like that can develop a website, you can go and do it yourself. A lot of these individuals that are doing these website projects major in an area called user experience, that they understand how a user flows throughout a website, what kind of barriers through a website development can stop a customer from making any action or make them leave the site entirely. So when it comes down to it, you know, sometimes those website projects can get rather expensive. It all depends on what the scope of the project is. But I do want to really note that it is worth every penny, but obviously you want to do your vetting as well. Just an area to think about. Another area, another lesson I want to speak about, lesson number 4 here, is be social, but not too social. Now, going through your curriculum, I noticed there was a lot of different social channels. You know, they speak about Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, blogging, things like that. And I think those are all great tools to be on. Maybe not Twitter. But the biggest thing is that I like to tell people, and I tell this to my clients, I tell this to my colleagues, and all my hotels as well, is that, as I said, be social, but not too social. You want to engage on your social platforms, but at the same time, you don't want it to be stealing everything away from you and your entire day on what you've been doing in terms of other marketing avenues. It's a great place to begin connecting with your customer, but you got to realize, depending on where you are, if you're a B2B customer, or for instance, I have an airport hotel in the middle of nowhere, and we got to realize sometimes that our product isn't sexy, our service isn't sexy, and we're never going to be the socially popular individuals. But with that being said, it is really important that we are on social media, because when people go through the buying research phase, now me as a millennial, at least this is how I do things, is before I make a purchase on a product or service, especially if it's not one that I'm aware of, I will actually do physical research, and that includes social media. And if I go on your website or on your Facebook page, and I see that you have one, but you haven't posted since November of last year, in my opinion, you look like you've already went out of business. Or you're just leaving things on the table, and it doesn't show a lot of professionalism in a lot of ways. So that's why I always tell people too, when thinking about social media, is first, where do you think your customers are the most? Now, if you're trying to reach caterers, meeting planners, things like that, maybe LinkedIn is going to be your best opportunity. Now, that same caveat is that Facebook advertising has the opportunity to target these individuals from a different angle, as maybe on their personal lives. So you could actually think about multiple touch points in different ways. But the biggest thing is really focusing on consistency rather than frequency. Is that it's better if you can dedicate yourself to 2 posts a week, and you know you can do that, and that's not a problem, go for it. That's great. That's better than, you know, you starting a new brand, being active on social media. You have, let's just say for the sake of argument, 12 followers, and you're pushing out 5 pieces of content a week. Well, then by the time you actually have enough followers, next thing you know, you're running out of content to talk about. And yes, you can rehash old content, but either way, you're still kind of just being left leaving yourself dry till you really gain momentum. And now when we talk about momentum as well, it's kind of getting into this little lesson I wanted to share with you guys is, And I read this in your curriculum that, you know, advertising isn't everything, but early on in your business, advertising is a big piece of the pie. Now, when we register our website, we create it, you know, we update it, we focus on user experience, we update SEO, which I'll get into in a minute. No matter what, we always start at the bottom of the bucket in terms of Google, Bing, Yahoo, all those platforms. So really, you know, when we're trying to reach new customers, our first 3 months might not be very fruitful if we don't do any advertising, because we're not showing up for particular keywords that they're searching for. So in lieu of that, there are some avenues that are very easily and very intelligent to reach your core audience early on. The first one would be Google Ads, and this is a really big favorite, especially, you know, if you're a software as a service, or you're a service industry, or just in general, is that what's nice about Google, especially with their search advertising, is that we're doing intent-based advertising. So, for instance, when I'm bringing it back to my hotels, let's use my LAX airport hotel, for instance, is that hotels near LAX airport. I mean, you can't really get more specific to your target audience than that. So it's really thinking about the keywords we want to target and making sure we're in front of that. So if we're in the healthcare space, no, we don't want to necessarily target healthcare, because that's going to blast us out to a new whole radius. But if it's a new device in the neurology or something like that, is that we can focus those keywords through very specific means to those individuals where they can learn more. Now, another platform you can focus on is Facebook. And what's great about Facebook, and actually I'm just going to throw a link into this as well, is that you can target interests, behaviors, and also on top of that, also expand your audience to people you've not engaged with. So let's say we run a Facebook ad to healthcare professionals advertising our new startup. Now, we ran it with a $100 ad budget, and we received, let's just say, 100 clicks. Now, from that, what you can do with Facebook is say, I want to create what they call a lookalike audience. And what it does is it gathers all the data points of those individuals that all clicked on your ad and found out what was in common with them. And then what it does from there is blast it out to the rest of the United States or whatever country you target, and finds people within a 1% similar interest rate. So it finds the people that are most likely like the people who have already engaged with your content. So as you can see, as I'm kind of explaining, I'm not sure if it's making full sense, but over time, your Facebook ads will get more and more intelligent because you're learning more and more data points about your customer or your engager, that website visitor, what have you. And what's great about LinkedIn, and it actually was just removed with Facebook, but it's even more accurate on LinkedIn regardless, is actually position names for companies. So you can target CEO, you can target human resources manager, things like that. So you now have the ability to directly target those individuals, be in front of them, and in fact, that's probably when they're the most active in their headspace to be thinking about, okay, I'm a meeting planner, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm trying to find connections and things like that. Is it could be a good opportunity when they're scrolling through their feed, if they see you, just to even get that thought in their mind. So the next area I want to speak about, and this is lesson 6, is SEO. And in terms of SEO, what I like to say is, yes, you need it, but don't bank on it. SEO has been a buzzword for several years, even before I was in the industry over 10 years ago. It used to be one of the most lucrative areas to be in marketing, and it's still kind of an interesting one where there is a lot of it, because at the end of the day, you can never guarantee with 100% certainty of success. You can never tell a customer, and if somebody's telling you, hey, I can get you to the first page on Google, they're probably lying to you. Is that the fact is that you can work on optimization of your website, targeting particular keywords, filling out meta titles and descriptions, and it's only going to do so much. And in a lot of ways, too, SEO has now evolved, and this goes back to the web design portion of my speaking, is that it really goes back to the programming side of website development. There's a thing, I'm not going to get too far in depth, but called schema. In a lot of ways, that's like a programming language that speaks with Google that says, okay, this is what type of business this is. This is their contact information, and that has an open-ended conversation with Google. And honestly, in a lot of ways, that has a lot more SEO value than trying to get backlinks to your website or trying to optimize for all these keywords. And there used to be a lot of in a lot of ways too, a lot of negative things that people used to do with SEO, or what they used to call black hat SEO. What people didn't think was bad to begin with ended up being bad. And in some ways, they actually ended up getting dinged. So really, in a lot of ways, when it comes to SEO, what I tell people is it's really focused on building content within your own website. So that means blogging, updating your content on your website, every 3 to 6 months, even just a little bit, keeping it fresh and easy. And what's really nice is that there are tools, and I might as well just get into this area now, that can help you with SEO. One of those tools is called Moz. That's M-O-Z. You can also use another one called SEMrush. SEMrush. I will advise that they aren't cheap programs, but if it was something that you're familiar with or wanted to get more educated in, there is tools out there that provide free trials for you to give a chance, just to learn maybe even a little bit about your website. And there's tons of graders online as well. I think even Google has one that you can even search for SEO website grader, where you just put in your URL, and it'll actually tell you the health percentage of your website. Moving on to number 7 is the one thing I wanted to make sure I touched on is never forget about the free marketing things you can do. So up to this point, I've talked about website, cost money, advertising, cost money, social media, if you don't know, it costs money. But there are other areas, especially if you are at least a little versed in marketing, is that things you can start doing as soon as today. So that could be blogging, sending out press releases, if you are familiar with that, although it's very tedious and sometimes can be non-fruitful. Influencer marketing, so that could be reaching out to somebody within your industry that has a lot of followers and saying, hey, do you mind reviewing our product, giving us your input, things like that. There's also cross-promotional posting. So if there's another business within your industry that's not necessarily a competitor, you can speak to them and say, hey, if I share yours, can you share mine, kind of scenario. And it could be a good opportunity to share an audience that might not have even discovered each other in the past. It works really well if you know multiple other startups as well. Email marketing is another one. So if you do start a landing page for your website to start gaining interest, not only do you have that list, but now you can actually reach out to them via email marketing with, again, news updates. Hey, we're going to launch in 7 days. Here, we launched last month and you still haven't signed up. Here's a discount. So there's many ways you can go about reaching these email individuals. Another one, and I feel like some people might laugh at this, but it isn't digital marketing at all, but it's direct mail. And yes, it does work, especially obviously service industry, but even myself getting jobs. One of my first marketing jobs was actually sending out a direct mail piece to an ad agency. So that is not, it's not wrong. It's just being about a little bit more clever than your traditional printout at the post office and they send it out just a little flyer. Is you got to think about how can you be different? How can you stand up on a stack of letters like this and make the business owner or the marketing person open that piece of mail? So, and the last one I wanted to share with you guys, I think is a real nugget. I definitely recommend writing this down, and this is something I've done for quite a while now. But as an expert in your field, I would recommend signing up for the website, and it's free. Help a Reporter Out, or sometimes called HARO. Now, what that is, it's an industry website that you sign up, and 3 times a day, 5 days a week, they will send you an email of all journalists in what niche they are looking for a quote or somebody to interview. Forbes is on there, Entrepreneur, Inc.com, and a bunch of healthcare websites, a bunch of lifestyle websites, things like that. Some of them are super easy, like what are 5 things you always bring in a trip? Or it might be, as a healthcare professional, what is something you find very daunting in your daily life? It could be a variety of things, but in a lot of ways, it's a good way to kind of brand yourself, especially as like Ethan Herbert, owner of such and such business, had this to say about this topic. And then next thing you know, you actually have a link up to your website using somebody else's followers, especially if it's somebody like, on a Forbes website or something like that, with a much larger following than you. So, and then the last kind of, to things, I'm sorry, my eighth lesson I wanted to share with you guys is always think about how you can automate your marketing, because as you can tell, I probably talked about a dozen different topics and maybe even a little sub bullets even between there. And there's a lot of things you have to manage, and it's not always easy, especially if you are running a business with a low staff or by yourself. So it's always worth thinking about working harder, or smarter, not harder. So some easy ways, when we talk about social media, there's social media dashboard. So that's like Hootsuite, which allows you to post from all social media channels from one. It also allows you to schedule reports for analytics, so you can see how many new followers you receive, how many people have clicked your links on your website, things like that. With email marketing too, a lot of these areas now actually have automation. So for instance, again, going back to the website, if we had that email field that somebody signed up for, is that we can have it automated where we automatically send them an email after the fact and say, hey, thank you so much for signing up for our email list. We're really excited about our product, our service, anything like that. We can't wait to stay in touch. And then, with future email marketing, you schedule it all at once, but really you can even dictate a whole flow even after somebody signs up for a product. Say, okay, this is a customer, and this is the first lesson they should learn. And then a week later, I want to send them this email as well. So again, is that it's better than setting up an email every single month. It's thinking about, okay, how can I set up the next 6 months and schedule that? And most email marketing tools nowadays have all that ability. And in fact, some of them are very cheap. For instance, MailChimp, I believe, is free up to a certain degree. And I believe Amanda uses that, so I might ask her after the fact if that is true or not. Direct mail, I just wanted to say too, there are a lot of services. In fact, there are even services that will handwrite direct mail pieces for you and send them out. They tend to be very expensive, but they are out there. Programmatic advertising. Now that's something, being kind of an advertising junkie myself, I don't really recommend a whole lot, because it's you kind of hand over the wheel to an algorithm in a lot of ways, and sometimes we like to have full and utter control of those things. But there are certain places you can say, hey, here's that amount of money a month, can you manage it? And they'll put that in as a show. And then the last one is hire an agency or a freelancer or a virtual assistant. Because again, as I said, I've went through many different areas here. If you have a million other things focusing on, it's so easy for these things to fall off your wheel. You might just think it's like, oh, I emailed my customers last month, or, my subscribers last month. I don't need to reach out this month. Well, that could have been somebody else's half hour setting that up, or an hour setting up. You could have paid somebody, a virtual assistant or an agency, or if you're doing a website design, obviously an agency there. You can focus on what's most important to you within your business, your products, your service, how to make what you're doing better. And that leads me to my last lesson here. And that's, stop thinking of your target market as faceless, as a big faceless crowd. Create a persona. Give that person a name. Give them feelings of family. What are they passionate about? What do they do for fun? What kind of car do they drive? So questions like that, and just write it out bullet per bullet. And I know it kind of seems weird. Well, I don't know what my target market drives or anything like that. But what you're doing with these things is actually gathering them together. And what you should do after the fact is write a story. So be it a paragraph or 3 about, let's just say, Hotel Harold. Hotel Harold is a business professional. He works and he travels a lot, so really he's just looking for a good place to sleep with free breakfast every morning. So when he goes to the airport the next day, he doesn't have to think about going to the airport and buying a $13 bowl of cereal. So now, while that might not solve all your problems in your industry, is when you're doing these marketing things, advertising, social media, website, writing the content in your website, is that you always go back to that story of that individual person. What would Harold think about this? Would Harold even care? And we just always circle back to that, because at the end of the day, marketing isn't about just trying to make a bunch of revenue off of people. Obviously, it's nice, but at the end of the day, we want to provide the right connections to the right people, to the right audience. And we want to make sure that we're giving them as much as we can and appealing to their needs, not just being vain in some way. So those are my 9 lessons. I know they were kind of all over the place, so I really encourage you asking questions. And yeah, thank you for guys for giving me a little time today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. I think that touched on a lot of really great things, and we've been talking about customer or like personas for like the past couple of weeks, and Ahmed came in I think 2 weeks ago and was talking about that and user design, user experience. It was a really great like, you know, affirmation of yes, this is really important. Now we've heard similar threads throughout, you know, all of these people saying this is really important. So
and you know, the thing is to remember too is that your persona is what they might be today, especially early on in the business. Doesn't necessarily mean that's what your persona will be in 6 months. It's always good to go back every so often and reevaluate what you're doing and making sure, okay, is this still really who I'm wanting to reach? Because at the end of the day, you might have created a product or a service you think solves a problem for group A, and there might have been a group B that might be a lot more profitable or find a lot more use out of your product that you might not have even realized. That especially when you release those features and people are interacting with it and people are talking about it, is that you're going to start seeing those trends. And things like Google Analytics and things like that, you might be able to identify some of those things pretty early on. But I always encourage customer feedback. So too, within your website or when you're speaking to your client, customer service of any sort of way, ask how you can just do it better, especially when you are talking to your said persona. So.
I have a question. So when you mentioned, creating your target market persona, like for my case, my idea is an e-commerce site where I'm connecting these catering businesses to their customers. So my customers are these businesses and the users are their customers. So just trying to, my focus would be on these businesses, right? So I'll be creating a persona for these businesses, or should
right, exactly. And and I won't lie, creating a B2B business persona is a little bit more difficult because you're not only dealing with their thoughts or feelings, but yes, you do need to take into some consideration as like, okay, what are they trying to solve for their clients, their customers as well? So it is kind of a multi-layered in that kind of sense of ways, is that yes, you're asking them, okay, what are their wants and needs? But at the end of the day, it might be they're just trying to make a commission or things like that too. Does that make sense?
So to not focus on their customers at all, like the users of the site.
The biggest question is, what are they trying? I mean, build the persona for the business side, the one you're speaking of. And then their customers at the same time when you're building that is like when, Harold deals with his clients, he always wants them to be happy with such and such. Is that you have to kind of, I'm hoping I'm explaining this right. It's his need that, he does good at his job. So what makes him good at his job? What does he provide to his customers that makes him valuable to them?
Right. Yeah.
Hey, Ethan, thanks. This has been very helpful. Could you say a few more things, like maybe the top 3 things that you would look for in a website design that would help with the search engine optimization?
Yeah, so there are some quick little 3 areas. The one would be meta titles and descriptions, and we're going to put that into one. So that's what Google sees. When you do a search on there, the title is the blue, and then the description underneath, that's what the description is. Making sure that is filled out on every single page of your website is super important, because otherwise Google's just going to scrape whatever it can find. Now, also in terms of design, is that you've got to make sure that it's always mobile friendly, because in a world that we're using our phones more and more and more rather than our desktops. In fact, there's people doing their jobs from their phones in some instances nowadays, is that we always have to make sure that our website is mobile friendly. And if it's not, you'll actually see a ding from Google saying, we're going to start showing your results less because you're not catering to everybody who's visiting your website. And then the last point too, I'm actually going to make it 4. The last one's a little bit confusing, but the third one, the one you can really focus on, is site speed. So when you start down, if you have too many images or you have a live video at the top or there's way too much content, you're slowing down that speed of your website. Even by a little bit of a millisecond, the longer it takes to load, the less Google is going to see you as a good, worthy website. Is that they're really trying to bring down site speeds. Is that, yes, internet's getting faster, but they want it even more instant. They want site loading speeds between about a second to load. So, and then lastly, something I mentioned a little bit earlier, but with schema, and that's really more the programming side. So when you do, try to meet with somebody with a website design or anything like that, it's important to ask them, hey, do you use schema? That's SCHEMA. And again, that's just kind of just a programmatic code that speaks with Google to say, hey, this is this kind of business, this is their hours of operation, this is their phone number, email, everything like that. So.
Okay. Oh, so that's how Google can pop up that stuff in the right-hand side. Sometimes they show you about the business.
That's Google My Business. So yes, that is dynamic, but you can create that yourself. Really, it's just creating it too is just to make sure that if you updated your site internally to, let's say your hours of operation, is that internally too, Google's algorithm may not show you as high as if you're closed at 2 in the morning or something like that when you're searching a said subject.
Okay.
But,
cool. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Was there anything else you guys wanted to ask? Here to help.
Able to hear me, Ethan?
Mm-hmm. Yes, again.
With like a B2C example, just curious how many platforms you'll typically target, like 3, 5, a dozen, just get a feel for what's the scope of something you'll often target for a typical customer scenario.
Are you talking about targeting in terms of advertising or?
Yeah, advertising, I guess.
Okay, so I mean, that all really kind of depends on the scenario and where the customers are going to be. A lot of it easier when, honestly, I tell people most instances is going to be Google search advertising because we can, again, kind of focus on people who really have the intent of finding something like us, like a product or service. Now, that takes what they call keyword research, is we have to find out what those people are searching, who is our target market, how can we get in front of them. That's going to be a lot of times a lot easier than trying to target somebody on Facebook or LinkedIn because they're casually going through their feed. They might be interested in it, but if it's 6 o'clock at night, I don't know. I don't always like looking up hotel stuff in the middle of the night either. But so really, I say, focus on one and then move on to the next. So Google search is really the baseline. That's where I tell a lot of people to start. But if you're trying to gain interest on a new product or service, it might be a good idea to kind of melt into Facebook a little bit because, okay, maybe people aren't searching for your product or service, or maybe you're solving a solution that just hasn't been there before. So trying to get in front of, using interest and behavioral targeting is we can try to start leaking into those areas. Excuse me. Now, the one other area I would say that I tell people to start off with too, along with Google search, is retargeting. And a lot of times that's on Facebook or it can be on Google as well. But that's really, you guys might be familiar with it, but when you go to an Amazon listing on a particular product, you don't buy and you leave and you go back onto Facebook and 10 minutes later you see that ad in your newsfeed. That could be another great opportunity. I usually tell people that's a great place to start because they've already shown interest in who you are as a company. So it's kind of like trying to, get a brand new customer rather than a reoccurring customer. It's always going to be more expensive for a new customer rather than trying to bring somebody back. So really Google search and any form of retargeting, those are the 2 platforms I'd really tell people to focus on. But you can always start bleeding into others as you feel comfortable. But it's really important you kind of have a solid base because it takes about 30 to sometimes 90 days for an advertising campaign to mature into its full performance. So I'd say, maybe start Google Ads now, and then from 3 months from now, maybe say, okay, what can we start doing on Facebook more, and kind of go with that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. You called it retargeting. Is that what the word you used?
Yes. Yes. A lot of times they're called retargeting. Every so often it will be called remarketing, but retargeting is the correct term.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
What was the thing you mentioned about a greater website? How do you access that to learn how your website?
Yeah, let me look it up. So there are a couple ones. The one that I always use is a website.grader. So that's GRADER.com. Another area I would check out would be Google Developers actually has what they call page speed insights. So that will tell you again, with SEO, we want to make sure our website's fast. That'll tell you, is your website too slow? And it will even give you recommendations. It might not make a whole lot of sense to you because there's a lot of programming talk. I mean, you can at least find out, is my website just way too slow? And then I'm trying to find the other one I use sometimes. And you know what? I actually have a tool that I use myself. If you send Jamie your website URL, he'll send it to me, and we'll pull a report, and I'll send it to you guys. How does that sound?
Great.
Excellent. Thank you.
Of course.
I think in terms of free marketing things that you can do, Ethan, I know you do a lot of writing on LinkedIn and Facebook. So
Mm-hmm.
you can talk a little bit about the value of that. And it's not so much marketing your business, but positioning yourself as the thought leader, right?
Yeah, so I mean, really it comes back kind of again, it's kind of like the email marketing is you're always trying to provide value and education in a lot of certain ways. One thing that I do personally is I'll do Facebook, my random Facebook ad tips of the week. I do that for my social profile, which is actually even gated keep it. So that's my way of networking, even when I don't have time for networking sometimes, is finding opportunities that I can provide value within a sentence or two. So I might post that on LinkedIn as well, saying, okay, if you want to do this, you can do that. It's really just finding about ways I guess the best way to kind of say it is what I tell people is 99% of what I know is free, but the other 1% is what I charge for. So it's really just being able to constantly give back, give them what they need, even if, I don't create barriers of saying, okay, I'm going to give you so much, but to get that last step, you're going to have to do this. Is that, it's really just eliminating that sales process in a lot of ways and just focus on it's like, hey, I just want to help you in any sort of way. And sometimes, some of my posts don't do that are very good. Some of them I think are probably overly confusing. So it's really focusing on how can you provide value in 30 seconds. Does that answer your question, Amanda? I feel like I know what you're talking about. But.
Yeah, I think just thinking about some of the free things you can do, and I didn't think about it in that perspective too, is, a lot of us, we know we should be going out networking, but you really just don't have time. And that's an interesting way to think about it too, which I never fully appreciated before.
Right. And then, so free things, going back again, email marketing, social media, it's free. Sometimes it's pay to play. Just regular networking. I'm trying to think of all the things right at the top of my head. Outreach to newspapers, local industry sites saying, hey, we'd love to do an interview, we'd love to be featured. Help a reporter out again, guys. I really, really recommend that. I've seen people get some really awesome features for absolutely free on, again, Forbes, Entrepreneur, Inc., like that, or even more industry-related sites. But it does, again, free is even with that little asterisk of how much time are you willing to invest in your marketing on top of your business itself. So.
Yep. That's another theme that's come up time and time again, that time is just another form of money.
Right, exactly.
Any other questions for Ethan?
What kind of budget should you put aside for advertising? Just a ballpark, aside from the free advertising options.
Yeah, so Google, I mean, Google's an interesting one because you have to kind of do keyword research to see how many average monthly searches for individual terms they are. But a good standing point, as I always tell people, is starting with a budget of around $500 per month. Is usually what, like for instance, when I do subcontracts, I won't accept anything less than $500 of an ad budget. But that's usually within a 30-day period because two is you kind of also want to have a good stable budget because if you are trying to be shown through searches throughout the day and you have, let's say, a dozen people click on your link at 8 a.m., well, now all of a sudden at 6 p.m., there might have been somebody who would have searched and would have bought from you. But since you wasted all your clicks early on in that day, is that you didn't get any sales or none of those people sold, but you missed out on that person. And that's again too where sometimes Google is one of the more advanced platforms. When it comes to Facebook, it is a little bit more different is that you can work with the budget you have. You can say, I only want to spend $10 a day, and you can do that with Google. But Facebook's a lot better about using that budget evenly throughout the day. Google, I'd say about $500 a month. If you're doing it by yourself, luckily, the thing is, I should mention with Google too, if you guys did try to start messing with it yourself, is Google also has the ability to go 20% over your budget in a single day if they can. So that's why a lot of times too, I say if you haven't done Google Ads, I wouldn't do it because I think it was my very first ad account ended up going over by $2,000 in a week. And I actually had a colleague that went over $20,000 in a month. So it's really easy to waste money. But Facebook is a lot better about using your funds. I usually tell people if you're running a Facebook campaign, just regular, not retargeting, I say $10 a day is usually a good amount, especially early on if you're trying to gain new traction to your site. So retargeting though, that's an interesting one. It all depends on the amount of traffic you are receiving. But for instance, even on my own personal efforts, when I do retargeting for my little e-commerce business, I spend about $1.25 a day on retargeting. So that's relatively cheap. And then, sometimes that might only bring in 5 clicks to my website, but at the same time, those were 5 relatively interesting clicks. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? All right. Well, thanks so much.
Well, I encourage you guys yeah, of course. Thank you guys for the opportunity. And I encourage you too, if you guys do have more questions, feel free to reach out. I am on LinkedIn. I'm sure my name is somewhere in the presentation materials. You can look me up. Just send me a message, questions. Sometimes it's a little easier for me to write out things and think about them a little bit more. So if you did need a little bit more elaboration, or if you just wanted me to take a look at some of the things you've been working on here as well, I'd be happy to do so. So never hesitate.
Sorry, I actually have a quick question before you go.
Oh, of course. What's up?
So you also run an e-commerce business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you deal with the technical disadvantages like security of data? How do you deal with that, like people's information, that sort of thing?
I'm sorry, can you ask the question one more time? What in regards to my e-commerce business?
In regards of the technical side of things, like the security of data, when it comes to marketing change, how do you deal with the technical
So for my e-commerce store, I'm a little bit different than a lot of other people. Is I actually use a platform called Shopify that actually takes care of a lot of that data itself, and a lot of those things are run internally by their systems. So I don't actually have to worry about a lot of that. Now, I'm not a traditional e-commerce store. In fact, I sell e-commerce pre-made dropshipping websites via an e-commerce store, so it's not a very typical product in a lot of different ways. But they handle anything in terms of data and security, GDPR issues, things like that. So,
who are they?
Shopify, so it's like shop, IFY.
Okay.
But there are other ones as well. They're the most popular one, and in fact, I think it's a little cheaper and it's a little bit more malleable than Shopify is what they call WooCommerce. So that's WOO Commerce. But.
Okay. Thanks. I'll have a look.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, thank you. I'll have a look at these.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, of course. Let me know if you have any questions, okay?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah, I have another question. Yeah, so in terms of, sorry, I'm just gonna keep you here. In terms
No,
of,
you're fine.
so, like, okay, so for the main attraction for customers placing their products on your e-commerce platform is trust and reliability.
Mm-hmm.
And these are two things that generally take time to establish. So being
Mm-hmm.
in the market, how can you, and you can see your customer can be reluctant to use the site because, they don't want to be the guinea pigs. They don't want to be taken for the trial run, and if it fails or whatnot. So how do you go about establishing that trust and incentivizing them to join the platform and express interest?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of different ways you can do that. A lot of it starts first off with your site. Legitimacy of a very well-designed site, you'd be surprised on how much that kind of sells somebody. Now, other areas that can help you give you kind of that feedback is testimonials, product reviews, forms of payment method. Another one as well, and it's getting a little bit more technical, is an SSL certificate for your website. So, when you type in HTTP, there's also another version called HTTPS. And what that is it's a secure socket layer, which pretty much just tells you that, hey, that there's an extra layer of security inside that coding. And now, in fact, Google Chrome is now starting to require that for all websites in terms of that. And then as well, so I said product reviews, being the types of payment you take there. And then the other one too, believe it or not, in a lot of different ways, is actually retargeting. Retargeting has that one opportunity to actually reach people at different points, especially in an e-commerce business, than you could from a traditional website. So let's say, for instance, somebody goes onto our e-commerce store, they add something to their cart, and then they leave the website. That's an intention, is that, hey, we might need to start building trust. So a retargeting campaign might be an ad that's a testimonial from a customer, or maybe a couple customers in there, trying to say, hey, this product was great, it solved all my problems, it was awesome, and give them an opportunity to click back onto their website, onto your website. And too, when it comes to legitimacy, most people, when they go to an e-commerce store, the first time is that they never buy anything. Is that they'll go, they might browse for a while, and then they'll abandon. Usually on Instance, they usually say you need at least 4 to 8 touch points before you can actually make a conversion. So being able to, even seeing people on your social feed, and when you're doing retargeted, people can comment, they can like it. So then you're also getting some social kind of confirmation in some ways that, hey, people are also, using this service, or they have questions about this service, and I'm seeing the answers, I'm seeing the customer support side of things. But then too, there are a lot of, when I speak of Shopify, is that there's a lot of other applications out there that will actually help you build that trust, making sure you have a clear terms of service, privacy policy, things like that are also really clearly important, because people do look for that even if they don't engage with it a whole lot. But if you don't have it, they're also going to wonder what's going on here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. There we go. One LinkedIn ad.
Bye.
Any other questions for Ethan? Okay.
All right, silence. That's a scary thing.
Well, again, guys, thank you so much for your time today. Amanda, I wasn't sure if you need to cover anything or.
That was perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to get going. I am done for the day. I hope you all have a good rest of your evening, all right? And don't get too snowy.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Ethan.